Welcome to this week's edition of Inter-University Debate. This is Group F in the Inter-University Debate, and it is the last group. As earlier in our previous debates, I stated that we have grouped the universities in different groups, and for this month of February, we will be hosting universities in Group F, and today we have Cavendish University that are going to hold their internal debates today. After the internal debates, we will have the inter-university debates where the universities in Group F will compete among themselves for which university will make it to the quarterfinals. I'm your moderator for today. My name is Lakeje Nafansi. I'm an advocate, a tax consultant, and a lecturer. So we already have universities that have made it to the quarterfinals. In Group A, we have Makerere University and Cavendish University that already made it to the quarterfinals. In Group B, we have Islamic University in Uganda and Uganda Pentecostal University. They're already in the quarterfinals. And in Group C, we have Makerere University Business School and Kampala International University. So will Cavendish University, after holding their internal debates, and after the inter-university debates, make it to the quarterfinals? We are yet to see that. Our topic for today is the National Development Plan 3 has identified 5 key growth drivers with the greatest multiplier effect as agriculture, tourism, minerals, oil and gas, infrastructure, and human capital development. To what extent are our priorities aligned to the National Development Plan? It's a very interesting topic, a bit technical, but together with my panelists from Cavendish University, we promise to make it as simple as possible in this debate. So today, Thursday, 3rd of February 2022, the debate runs from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. It is brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance, that is CCG, and Civic Space TV. So if it's your first time to watch this debate, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and also hit the notification button so that you are notified whenever we have this program and you are sure not to miss out. So for today, I'm going to introduce my panelists from Cavendish University. They are all law students. So I'm going to start with the first panelist, and that is Mugisha. Mugisha, please say hello to us and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Jenda Fancy. I'm Mugisha Echo from Cavendish University. I'm glad to be hosted. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mugisha, and we are happy to have you for this inter-university debate. Our second panelist is, she's called Miriam. Miriam, you're welcome. Okay, we will have Brian there in a bit. So last but not least, our fourth panelist for today's debate is Chihumuro Martha. Martha will be joining us in a bit. She is also a law student from Cavendish University. So as earlier stated, our topic for today is on the National Development Plan 3. So to introduce this topic, in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic that has caused a lot of social and economic impacts in different parts of the world, Uganda launched the 3rd National Development Plan, that is 2020-2021 to 2024-2025. Now, the National Planning Authority is mandated, as we know, under Section 7.1 of the National Planning Authority Act of 2002, as its primary function to produce a comprehensive and integrated development plans for the country, elaborated in terms of the perspective vision and the long-term and medium-term plans. So, what is Uganda's long-term and medium-term plan right now? Currently, Uganda has Uganda Vision 2040, and at a regional level, we have the East African Community Vision 2050, We also have Africa Agenda 2063. And lastly, we also have the Sustainable Development Goals. So, the National Development Plan should be in line with all this. And as we know, the Uganda Vision 2040 aims to transform the Ugandan society from a peasant to a modern, prosperous society. So whether the recently launched the National Development Plan is in line with Vision 2040, our panelists for today will help us to understand that. So as stated earlier, our topic is the National Development Plan 3 has identified 5 key growth drivers with the greatest multiplier effect as agriculture, tourism, minerals, oil and gas, infrastructure, and human capital development. To what extent are our priorities aligned to the National Development Plan? Let the debaters take it over from here. I will start by inviting the panelists to give us their opening statements. And I'll start right from the first panelist, and that is Mugisha. Mugisha, you're welcome to give us your opening statement.
Thank you very much, moderator, Ms. Jenda. As you have introduced the topic, we're really talking about the National Development Plans, and currently we are at number 3. But maybe just to give a recap, when this particular government came in power in 1986, it had a 10-point program. I think with time, it has rolled it out to now it is into the National Development Plan, which is split into 3 of them, rather 6, and currently we are at the 3rd one. Basically, when you're talking about the National Development Plan, we are looking at a framework and a plan in which the country is trying to strategize, to put in place and to implement these strategies in order for it to achieve its goals. Particularly when you look at the National Development Plan 3, it's basically its goal is to increase household incomes and improved quality of life for all Ugandans. And basically, the theme is about sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, of course, employment and wealth creation. But of course, it has a lot of challenges and in regards to whether this is achievable. So basically, we are going to look at some of these plans that really are they really strategic? Are they really measurable? Are they really attainable at the same time? Because we have to compare what is in reality or what is the actual scenario on the ground as compared to what is in the text. Does it meet our priorities? Are these our priorities that are involved in these plans? So that's basically what we are going to be talking about today. And we shall be enlightening ourselves and learning more about the National Development Plans. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was Echo. Thank you for your opening statement, that was very elaborate. Let us also have an opening statement from Miriam. So Miriam, you're welcome to give us your opening statement.
Thank you so much, Jenda. Like my colleague Echo said, the National Development Plan stipulates the country's medium strategic plan direction that it has to take towards an economic development. Now, there are so many things that go into it. And I think that we, as this panel, is here to discuss that and actually see that whether we as a country are aligning ourselves, whether to the national budget, the government, different stakeholders that take part in framing this framework to see if we align with the national development plans and if they actually are achievable. So we have to ask ourselves questions and basically put them on the hot seat and see if they actually are implementing what they say they're implementing towards economic development within the country. And it's going to be very interesting to see, as we discuss as panelists, if our government and the different stakeholders, the private sector, the public sector, and individuals who play and have a part in this, whether they're actually fulfilling this. And I'm excited about this. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. We are equally excited for this discussion, and thank you for that opening statement. Let us also get an opening statement from Brian. So, Brian, you're welcome to give us your opening statement.
Straightforward. My name is Aruho Law, as earlier on tried to say. I'm a second-year law student at Cavendish University, Uganda. Fast forward to the question that the topic under discussion, that is whether the National Development Plan 3 has actually got a greater extent or a less extent to the priorities that were aligned in the National Development Plan. This was under infrastructure, agriculture, tourism, minerals, oil and gas, and then human capital development. So one of the things we need to look at is whether, going back in history, whether the National Development Plan 1 actually did work, and if it didn't work, what challenges refused it from working. So then we also have to look at the National Development Plan 2, whether it actually had implementations that were done. I mean, on a 50-50 scale, we need to see if some of the things that were carried from the National Development Plan 1 actually came into play to be worked upon. And then now coming back to the current statistics of the National Development Plan 3, seeing if the agro-industrialization that was talked about in the NDP2 was actually realized, seeing if actually the unemployment statistics that we're talking about were actually reduced, and these other things that come into play. For example, looking at the acceleration of import substitution, because we can't talk about the NDP3 working or looking at how far it has been implemented without looking at actually what the NDP2 did to the society of Uganda. I beg to submit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Brian, for that. So moving forward, I would like to direct my first question to Mugisha. So Mugisha, looking at the National Development Plan 3, what do you think are the objectives of this National Development Plan 3? Mugisha Echo, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you very much. First of all, when we are looking at the National Development Plan, we leave alone its objectives, but also what are the goals and the theme. And the goal of the Plan 3 is to increase household incomes and improved quality of life of Ugandans. And in this, of course, it concentrates mostly in these goals, and the key drivers like Brian has mentioned, looking into agriculture, tourism, minerals, infrastructure, and all these. And basically, when you're talking about income as the goal stipulates, you're looking at creation of jobs. And one of the objectives of actually the current National Development Plan 3 is to create jobs. And one of the targets is to create over 500,000 jobs. And I believe through industrialization and through other sectors, agriculture sector and infrastructure and the rest, and tourism, like it mentions as the key drivers to achieve this growth and its objectives. So creating jobs is one of the objectives. And then another thing that I think is very important and germane, it's income inequality, to reduce the income inequalities in Uganda, because when you look at the general view of the poverty levels and the inequality of the income, which hold more health or resources in Uganda, you find that around 3.6 million Ugandans hold almost the biggest share in regards to the resources or the wealth of the country. Another objective that is stipulated is in regards to the economic growth. It's looking at enabling the economy to grow at 7% growth as compared to the current, which is 3%. So it has to look into that as well as lowering the poverty levels. The poverty levels, which are kind of high currently. I think one of its main objectives, the plan will be to reduce on the poverty levels. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Echo, and we will be getting back to you on that issue. Now, moving on to Miriam. Miriam, as earlier stated by Brian, we had National Development Plan 1. I think also it came out from Mugisha. And later we had National Development Plan 2. And now we have National Development Plan 3. And my question to you is, how different is National Development Plan 3 from National Development Plan 2 and 1?
Yes, so the National Development Plan basically sets out, again, as stipulated, the strategies that the government or the country wants to take in terms of development. And it prioritizes what it wants to implement towards economic development. Now, what happens is in these three, like you stated before, NDP 1 was from the period of 2010, 2011 to 2014 to 2015. And the second NDP was for 2015, 2016 to the year of 2019 to 2020. And the current one is from the year of 2020 to 2021 to 2024 to 2025. Now, what happens is that they state the strategies and the objectives that they want to achieve. And when they're not achieved, they're carried on to the next one. So when you look back at NDP 1, which was in 2010 to 2011, the goal was to basically develop the country. Now in NDP 2, the plan was to propel the country into middle income status by 2020. Now, I do not think the goal is achievable. First of all, when you say developing the country, propelling it from middle income status developing it into a middle income status country, to achieve that with all the problems that Uganda faces, I don't think 5 years is enough time to achieve going from being a developed country to a middle income country. Now, this goal, obviously, they set for objectives that they were pursuing to do this, which was to increase sustainable production, productivity, and value addition, key growth opportunities. And they had to increase stock and quality of the country's infrastructure and accelerate the country's competitiveness and enhance human capital development, and then also strengthen mechanisms for quality and effective and efficient service delivery. Now, some of these were achieved in NDP 2, but however, they were carried on to NDP 3. And under NDP 3, they set the goal for the objective was to increase household income and improve quality of life for Ugandans. And the vision was to transform society from peasant to a modern and prosperous country within 30 years. Again, these goals that they set in the NDP plans they have a vision and they have goals, but when they're not achieved, they're pushed forward to the next NDP plan. Now, as a country, I believe that we, for one, need to set better goals because the vision is there, but the vision is not achievable in 5 years. So the objectives are just basically passed on to the next one with hope that they'll be improved and they'll be strengthened and they'll be achieved. So the NDP objectives are just passed on from the next plan when they're not achieved. And the government hopes that they can strengthen these and achieve these objectives later on in the next plans.
Okay. Thank you, Miriam. Moving on to Brian. Brian, I would like you to start right from where Miriam stopped. So what are some of the lessons that were carried from National Development Plan 2 and have been addressed by National Development Plan 3?
All right. Fast forward to what Madam Lawoko had earlier on stated. Some of the lessons that were carried on from the NDP 2 to NDP 3 were, one of them was competitiveness for sustainable wealth creation. So you see that from the time frame of NDP 2 to NDP 3, we actually, the government of the Republic of Uganda carried forward sustainable wealth creation ideologies from the previous NDP 2 now to the current NDP 3. And this majorly revolved around, increased household income, which we are not yet sure if it's happening, because this was a pillar for the NDP 2. If we are to critically analyze the NDP 2, it was more of trying to build a backbone economy for the Republic of Uganda so that we can have an international market. And that would only come through having an able competitive society, that is through sustainable wealth creation, through inclusive growth percentages, that is when you're looking at investment percentages, when you're looking at aspects of import and export trade. So when you come to the NDP3, things that were actually carried through and put onto major emphasis was the wealth creation, the household wealth creation, and the income ratio. So you'll see that we still carried on with the operation wealth creation, and then we had the Myoga, and then because from NDP1, then you had the Intandikwa. So it's still a process of trying to get the 30 years theme, because you see, if you're to analyze the theme of all the NDPs, that is NDP1, NDP2, NDP3, it all has a time frame of 30 years, because the general theme is a transformed Ugandan society from a peasant to a modern and prosperous country within 30 years. So now the NDP3, by the time we complete it, we shall have 15 years. So the issue is not about how many years we have so far spent in the 3 NDPs, but are the NDPs actually being worked upon? Do we have a proper implementation strategy, or it's all about paperwork? I beg to submit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. And Echo, I would like you to start right from where Brian stopped. So to what extent has Uganda achieved National Development Plan 2?
Thank you very much, Jenda. I think one of the achievements, though on, of course, on the bigger scale, would look at the main goal of Plan 2 was Uganda to reach a middle income status, which it was a bit, it was overly ambitious, we might say. But well, there are some achievements that we can point out, depending on the objectives which it had. Well, there has been some sustainability in peace and security, and the micro economy stability. There has been stability of the microeconomy, which I think it's an achievement, considering the challenges that we have had, the COVID pandemic, and the rest of the challenges that really try the economy of the country. There's been some stability as compared to the years past, but as well as there has been an improvement in the GDP per capita, and that it was from $844 to 878. I think that's an achievement, but still it can be credited back to the stability of the micro economy. As well as there has been improvement in the domestic revenue collection in those given years, and it's because of the objectives and some of the implementation plans that have taken place in regards to resource mobilization, both in the domestic taxes, the imports and exports, which have really improved the domestic revenue. There has been also some improvement in regards to the distribution of electricity and infrastructure. Well, the improvement might be minimal, but it is there. We might say that it is really there in regards to electricity and entire infrastructure, accessibility, roads, road networks. There has been some improvement, I might say. So basically, on a general scale, though we find that the goal of Plan 2 was really overly ambitious to achieve middle income status in just in a period of 5 years. It was a bit overly ambitious, but that being said, we find that there are really some achievements that the plan has attained. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Echo. Now, putting the National Development Plan 2 behind us and moving to the National Development Plan 3, my question to you, Miriam, is if you were in position of authority, what would you prioritize in the National Development Plan 3?
Yes, hi. In the National Development Plan 3, remember they've identified great multiplier objectives, which is like my mate, agriculture, tourism, oil and gas, minerals. However, I believe that the backbone of our society is the youth, and employment is a unemployment is a key objective that needs to be dealt with, because remember, if you want to industrialize and grow in such areas, you need to make sure that you have the backbone of society working. Now, how can you get that done? Remember, they stipulate that they want, with these objectives, they've stated that the under tourism, it aims to increase attractiveness as a preferred tourist destination, which is our country. And the expected results include sustainability in increasing tourism, arrivals and revenues, as well as the employment in the tourism sector. So I believe that the one thing that they should do, or the government should do, is in setting these objectives, they need to have the young people, the youth, and unemployment as a key objective at the backbone of it. How are they going to build the youth, and how are they going to fix unemployment? That's one of the things that I believe is so important for our country if we're to grow. In terms of agriculture, Uganda mostly exports, I think 80% of our exports come from coffee, tea, maize, and we need the farms to do this. And we need, if they can create jobs for the youth in all these objectives, if it's tourism, if it's agriculture, if it's minerals and oils, we're able to build our economy, we're able to employ the youth. So I think unemployment should be one of the main objectives that the government focuses on. And they can do this not just by stipulating it, but also actually implementing it. If we can get all the key stakeholders to take part in this and implement this through, because they do state that they want the great objectives are, like they say, is agriculture, tourism, and all the objectives that have been set. Now, if they can sort of fit the youth in the plan as well, that does build our economy, build our country.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. So Miriam seems to suggest that the youth should be prioritized and should be at the back of the mind as we develop the National Development Plan. So I would like to push this to Brian. Do you agree with Miriam on that point?
I would second what Ms. Lawoko, Miriam, has talked about with regards to youth empowerment and the other kids points that she did. Because you see, in the NDP2, yes, the budget was there, but then you look at the budget allocation being made and the actual financing being totally different topics. So while drafting the NDP3 to us was supposed to look at those key aspects that were not fully harnessed during the NDP2 implementation strategies. So, because now when you go to the NDP3, fast forward to the budget that was made, the infrastructure sector, that is works and transport, was given 5.8 trillion Uganda shillings. That's 13% of the budget. Then you go to the agricultural sector, that was actually given 1.3 trillion shillings, Uganda shillings. And to an economy like a Ugandan economy that has a strong backbone to agriculture, 1.3 trillion Uganda shillings is as good as saying that out of 12 months I worked for 2 months. You see, so making the other 8 months idle. So we are not giving more of our emphasis to things that matter, because you see the budget had a bigger financing to the military, the security. Yes, we need security, but we shouldn't hype its allocation as much as we did hype it, because we later left out things like tourism, which is good for our public relations, and then we gave it 193.6 billion Uganda shillings. I think that was a very big underestimation of our capacity. But though, fast forward, what were the things that we needed to have looked at? Needed to have looked at the acceleration of import substitution and export promotion strategy for a range of goods, including medicines and other health products, because that still comes across to human capital development. Then secondly, we had to look at agro-industrialization and light manufactures, that is based on Uganda's cooperative advantage. Then going to number 3, looking at adding value to agricultural products and minerals, because still that when you have a value added to your agricultural products, remember, we are going to export these products. So when we export, we are indirectly promoting our nation. That cuts across to tourism, and also that cuts across to things like help finance a certain family for a certain period of time. But this is a long-term investment. Then number 4, we had digitalization of many aspects of socioeconomic activity to improve efficiency and reduce costs such as e-commerce, because when you go to digitalization, you're reducing costs. Because if we have an e-commerce platform, an e-government platform, which has teleconferencing, procurement, and dispersion of justice, you actually find that we shall reduce on very many costs, of administration and operations. If we had e-learning, if we had robotic automation, if we had artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, cloud computing, digital marketing in tourism, this will entail fast tracking of the 4th industrial revolution, because as a nation, we need to be looking at the 4IR. That is the 4th industrial revolution. Then we had to also look at the reform of urban transport to reduce congestion, starting with the greater Kampala metropolitan area and eventually regional cities. That is to still bring us to the infrastructure, because if we are looking at the extent to which our priorities have been aligned to the National Development Plan, and yet our theme, the theme has always been about a transformed Ugandan society from a peasant to a modern and prosperous country within 30 years. You can't achieve that minus having a clearly stated urban transport. You need a clear transport system. Then number 6, looking at the aspects of domestic tourism stimulation to encourage many Ugandan residents to explore local touristic destinations. And then lastly, we had to look at building a strong and durable economy around 8 fundamental human needs. That is namely food, clothing, shelter, defense, human resource development, that is health and education. Then looking at infrastructure, that is through electricity, roads, rail, ICT, telecoms. All these things will help the country to establish a firm basis for service industries such as tourism, hospitality. Because when you're looking at tourism and hospitality, we are looking at hotels, the bars, the nightclubs, the casinos, etc., as well as entertainment, that is concerts, sports to flourish. So when you're looking at a national development plan, what we expect actually in the fast forward national development plan for is to have enough investment financing. We can't always talk about having a goal of 30 years when we aren't financing our investment sector. You see, allocation, we need to increase on the allocation, the financing, that will help improve the availability of investment finance and the cash flows of micro, small, and medium enterprises, because this still comes down to the people of the Republic of Uganda that we are trying to help attain the realistic goal of 30 years. However, having a development plan of 5 years, you can't honestly draft a national development plan, and then you say that you'll implement it in 5 years. No, that cannot happen. Maybe you'll implement out of 100%, you may implement 35%, but you won't implement it fully. So we shall continue pushing things to the next national development plan. That would be fine. But then the question is, when they are pushed to the next development plan, the next financial year, will they actually be implemented? That is one of the few things that the nation should actually look into. I beg to submit.
Okay, thank you, Brian. That was quite elaborate. He was able to bring out what should have been prioritized in the National Development Plan, but wasn't, and he also brought out what was prioritized and shouldn't have been prioritized. So before I move to Brian, I can see Miriam's hand is up. So Miriam, you can unmute and then submit.
I would like to thank my colleague Brian for stating all that he did about the achievements that the country has given. But I still feel at the end of the line is that despite us having sustainable peace and security, like Brian mentioned, and despite the economy doubling and the GDP per capita growing, the underlying issue is unemployment. And I feel that with all the national development plans that have been stated, that have been put forward by the government, the number one underlying issue is unemployment, because you realize that even if they have stated all these objectives, agriculture and tourism, these are great for the country as a whole, but they continuously leave behind the issue of unemployment, and a large proportion of Ugandans and households don't have a good income in their houses. You find a household of one, and they're dependent on one person. And I believe that every time the National Development Plan is drafted and put forth again, they continuously recycle the same objectives on multiplying economic growth, but they forget the one fundamental problem that does need fixing, and that's glaring, which is unemployment amongst Ugandans. So I beg to submit that I wish and I hope that the government as a whole and the various stakeholders that draft the National Development Plan are able to address this issue, because constantly recycling the objectives and not actually meeting the targets that are actually very glaring, like unemployment, is a problem. And I do believe it needs to be prioritized as one of them, and because it is achievable, because all the other National Development Plans objectives are long-term, and with time, they can be implemented. However, unemployment is a glaring issue that needs to be addressed now. And even as they are drafting the National Development Plan, they should prioritize unemployment, especially amongst the young people, because Uganda has a growing population, and it needs to be addressed. I beg to submit.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. And I think Miriam and Brian already started debating the actual issue in this topic. So moving to Mugisha to also have a contribution on these issues of priorities. So my question to you is, to what extent are our priorities as a country aligned to the National Development Plan?
Thank you very much. I think as a country we have some imbalance. People who are in the policy makers tend not to know what is happening actually on the ground. They either tend not to know, or there is no political will. They have their own interest, and they in addressing the issues that of public interest. When you look at the plan and the development plan 3 as compared to what is actually happening, for example, the unemployment, we look at the agenda of the plan, and then you compare it to the budget allocation that has been passed recently, you realize there's a discrepancy. We ask why there's a discrepancy, or why there's no anchoring the budget regards to the plan, and vice versa. We realize that most of the areas that we think the government would have prioritized, especially the unemployment, like Brian and Miriam have stated, they have not really paid attention to it. And one of the challenges that was clear in regards to the challenges that was faced in the development plan 2 was the limited access to and high cost of capital. Most of these households, or most of the local people, don't really have access to capital. And the capital that is available, the loans that they can access in banks, they are either hard to access, or they are really expensive. They're really high. The cost in regards to the interest, it's really high. And I remember in 2016, Kenya, in the leadership of Uhuru Kenyatta, they proposed the capping of interest rates. Well, it didn't work out for them, but when we analyze worldwide, it happens that over 72 countries actually cap their interest rates from the banks. When you see the interest rate that the Bank of Uganda gives to these banks, it's very low. I think it's around 6.5% interest rate. But these banks, the fact that those interest rates are not capped, they go on to charge people 20%, between 16% to 20% of interest, which I believe constrains the local people from accessing these particular loans. So I believe if the plan was really to make sure that people access, and there is inequality of income inequality, as well as when you look at the general goal of moving the society, or transforming Uganda from a peasant to a modern and prosperous, then we have to make sure that most of these households have access to these loans, have access to these to capital, so that they can sustain themselves, and they can bring out development. And Brian actually mentioned it in regards to microeconomy. When the plan seems to concentrate more on the micro economy, and then it doesn't really it doesn't really look critically at the microeconomy as well as the local people, what they need. Another issue is when you're talking about, for example, human capital development and livelihood, I think you're talking about education as well as health. Again, when you look at the plan, it does not really, when you look at the plan and you compare it to the budget, the issue of health has been really, it has not really been tackled by both the budget and actually the plan, which I consider would be a priority. Recently, the pandemic actually kind of opened our eyes to some of the cries of the local people have been having in regards to the cost of medicine and cost of the medical bills and everything, because everyone all of a sudden was complaining about it. But this is something that actually has been happening for a very long time. I understand that we had the bill. The bill was passed, I think, in 2014 of the national health insurance. Unfortunately, that is a very high priority that we would consider the country, but it's not stated. Actually, it's not even tackled very well in this plan 3. So I think there's a discrepancy, and we are not really prioritizing the things that concern the local people, sadly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Echo. I think you a little bit preempted my question that I would like to pose to Brian. So Brian, would like you to start right from there. To what extent has the different socio-economic problems that were brought by COVID-19 addressed by this National Development Plan? Because we understand that it was launched in the middle of the pandemic. So to what extent has it addressed some of these socio-economic problems that have been brought by COVID-19?
Could you be getting me now?
Yes.
Okay. Before we actually go to what would be addressed in the NDP 3, when you're to read it from the beginning, to actually show you how the President of the Republic of Uganda clearly stated that this was actually drafted during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, if you're to critically look into whether it has helped, rectify a number of issues, would actually be moving to the health sector. However, we need to first know why a nation has to do national development planning, because it's not all about waking up one day and saying, look, let's make an NDP. You need to look at how you're going to implement it, you see? So why do we need a national development planning first? It's because the purpose of development planning is to promote sustainable and stable development of the country and to improve the people's quality of life. It further enumerates the main tasks of the state and society to achieve balanced and sustainable development. So all this comes through economic stimulus and different growth strategies. However, before you actually say that, look, the nation was hit by a pandemic, we also need to look at how are you people actually ready for this? Because a pandemic is something that will come out of the blue. But then, did you have a clear consultative framework that shows that maybe you had the youth, maybe you had the doctors from the health sector, maybe you had different youth activists, different youth leaders that actually tell you that, look, aside from the office work, aside from the paperwork, this is actually this is actually what is needed to be implemented. You get it? So these are the different things that. But fast forward, to the pandemic, I think this helped us look at what actually needs to be financed before the other, because in the previous in our budget, you'll find that give me a little time. You'll find that the financing was actually done more. The budget financing was actually given more to the security and works and transport, because if you're looking at what the COVID-19 pandemic has actually done to us, you'll see that in the next NDP4, we need to have a bigger percentage going to the health ministry, because the health ministry was given 2.7 trillion Uganda shillings. That is only 6%, and yet we haven't looked at how many Ugandans were recorded in the previous population census. And in that time frame, how many Ugandans were given birth to? Because even when there was a COVID-19 pandemic, people were still born. Well, other people died, but we still had people being given birth to. You get? So we need to see that before we actually give 4.5 trillion to the security sector, that is 10%. Let's also look at the health of our people. Let's put it as a top priority. You know, so when we have, because maybe to break down the budget for you, the total budget was 45 trillion Uganda shillings. The works and transport that goes under infrastructure was given 5.8 trillion. That is 13%. The security sector was given 4.5 trillion. That is 10%. Then interest payment 4 trillion, 9%. Education 3.6 trillion. That is 8%. And then health 2.7 trillion Uganda shillings. That's 6%. So this pushes us to, you know, to the extent of asking ourselves, what is our top priority as a nation? Is our top priority security, or it's first looking at the health? Because in anything you do, you need to first look at the people of your nation first. So we ought to have, you know, in the next NDP4, in the next budget, we need to have a bigger allocation going to the education, health, and infrastructure department. Because if we had given the 4.5 trillion to the health sector, we wouldn't be going through this crisis of us saying, look, we don't have enough money to actually pay the medical workers. We don't have enough money to pay the medical interns. We don't have enough money, you know, to purchase small, you know, cylinders, gas cylinders. Because a nation as ours, if we used to give, let's say like the 4.5 trillion we give to security, if we gave that money to the health sector, we wouldn't be as badly hit by the COVID pandemic as it is. So this still pushes us back to the books of, you know, accountability, you know, having a proper audit and knowing, look, yes, we made a mistake in the NDP2. We have moved with this mistake to the NDP3 because trust me, this is not going to be implemented. As a nation, we are very good at doing paperwork. But then the implementation is actually totally different. Because when COVID-19 came around, you know, the Minister of Finance, Honorable Matia Kasaija, went on television and stated that although the COVID-19 pandemic has presented challenges for the economy, the country also drew several lessons and opportunities. That is to inform the government on different economic stimuluses. But this wasn't put onto ground, you get? So I think the COVID-19 has taught us as a nation that we need to give, you know, we need to give proper emphasis into certain things. We need to give emphasis to the health ministry. We need to give emphasis to the education ministry. We need to give emphasis to the works and transport sector, that is infrastructure. Because trust me, this team of 30 years and hold on a bit. Having a theme saying that it transformed Ugandan society from a peasant to a modern and prosperous country within 30 years, it's only but a vision. So having a vision actually has to push us more into doing what actually brings a vision to life. So we have to look at all these things, put them into play. One, looking at, yes, the COVID-19 has come, but let's try to tap into the youth capital, you see, because let's also tap into the, you know, the economic capital. Let's look into the business world, the business people of the Republic of Uganda. So that one, we can have acceleration of import substitution and export promotion strategies for a range of goods that includes medicines and other health products, you know. Then we need to add value to the agricultural products and minerals, as I earlier on stated. Because trust me, without all this, you know, the NDP3, because when the NDP3 was being passed, the statements that were made were that it will build progress by enhancing value addition in key growth opportunities. And that was agriculture, tourism, minerals, oil and gas, infrastructure, and human capital development. But then the budget was saying otherwise. Because if those were our key sectors of investment, there was no growth opportunity of security. And if that was our investment, how come the NDP3 didn't look at the health being, you know, as being a key sector? Because this was also an NDP2, it was an NDP1, and these things were never implemented. So therefore, coming down to my conclusion, the major thrust of the NDP3 was to show how and to harness the sustainability use of the country's natural resources, that is for socio-economic development, for the benefit of the current and future generations of Ugandans, So therefore, the people that implement the NDP3s, the NDPs, when they're looking at the NDP4 in future, they should aim at harnessing both government and private sector strengths in a mixed economy approach in order to grow the real economy. With all this, I beg to submit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. That was very, very elaborate. So moving on to Miriam. So Miriam, let us shift the debate from priorities to whether as a country, we even respect what we stipulate in the National Development Plan. So my question to you is, to what extent does Uganda respect the National Development Plan?
Okay, this brings me back to what Brian talked about, being held accountable. Now, if you look at the overall cost of the financing of this current NDP3 and the planned program, it's estimated around, I think, 411.68 trillion on average. And this is how much the government stipulates would be needed to implement this national development plan. My question is, I think the rhetorical question is that when they state and they estimate this amount of money that's going to be allocated for the national development plan to be implemented, and then you look at whether it's actually being put to the cause and actually making sure that it's implemented, there are discrepancies there, because when you look at the underlying problems, nothing's actually being solved. It's being solved in small bits, and there's still loopholes that are actually glaring, and you can see that. So they're saying that in the costing and the financing of this plan, 67.3% of the money is going to go to the resources expected to fund this plan, and the government will take on 32.7 for the plan to be implemented. My question is when they're allocating plan, are they actually solving the problems? Because underlyingly, you realize that Brian stipulated, they just carry on the objectives of the mainland, but nothing's being solved. Look at our infrastructure. Yes, they've taken steps to build roads, country like in places like Gulu, and there's still problems with infrastructure in our roads. And when you look back at the national budget, you're thinking, okay, they've given us this amount of money to make sure that all our goals and objectives are met, but there's no accountability, you see? So we have to ask ourselves, are they actually just giving us a national development plan with outrageous goals that are not being met? They set the budget so high, they set the vision so high, and when you break it down and you look at everything around you, it's not being implemented. And you ask yourself, so what's the point of having a national budget? Having a national development plan if it's not going to be implemented? And if the national budget does stipulate these ways to help it be implemented, why is it not working? So I think it goes down to being accountable and also making sure that when they do stipulate this vision and these goals, that they actually follow through as a government, the different stakeholders that are involved. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Miriam. Now moving on to Mugisha. So Mugisha, my question to you is, what do you think are some of the challenges that the government faces in implementing the National Development Plan? Because we have heard from all the panelists, and we have seen this happen, issues of why are these not being respected? Why is it that we are not achieving the goals that we set in the National Development Plan? Now we are working towards Vision 2040, and we need to have the National Development Plan aligned with it. That means we should have achievements. What are the challenges that, as a county, we face in implementation of this National Development Plan?
Thank you very much, Gender Fasi. I think one of the most appalling problems that actually we need to address is the growing population, which of course ends up putting a lot of pressure on resources when it comes to implementing some of these plans. Because Uganda has, I think we grow at 3% annually, and we have one of the highest growth in population in the entire world. So it's an issue that actually we when they are making these plans, they should really consider, because the World Bank has approximated that in 2050 we shall be over 100 million Ugandans. So those 100 million Ugandans in the next almost only like 30 years, we shall be over 100 million people. So such a population puts a constraint on the resources. And considering another challenge, because most of these challenges actually are intertwined together, considering the rate of corruption that we are having, and actually that one could also come as a challenge, which renders some of these resources inaccessible to people. And with such an increase in population, I think it is it constrains these plans. There's no way we can move forward with a high growing population and with a high growing corruption and such cases, because it ends up constraining and putting a lot of pressure on the resources. So I think that's one of the challenges. Another challenge that actually, like I said before, is accessibility to capital. Both and this is mostly to household and the locals. There's an issue in regards to accessibility to capital. It may, for instances where it's accessible, it is costly. It is highly costly because of the interest rates that these banks are charging, and it ends up, of course, constraining on the microeconomy as well as the income of most of the local people. Then another issue, of course, is the income inequality. You see, we have been saying that most of these goals are not achieved, and they keep on being carried. And one of the main goals of the plan of Plan 2 was to reach a middle income status. And when you look at the inequality, the income inequality, both the gender and income inequality in Uganda, it is really appalling in that it is highly challenging, and it affects the implementation of these plans. Then another issue is accessibility and the cost of some of these services. For example, electricity. I think a unit of electricity is around 700. That is before tax, but when you put tax, it's around 1,000 a unit of electricity. So when you're planning a country and you want it to develop, according to these plans, I saw one of the plans was to have electricity at only 5 cents a unit. So that's why we are wondering whether these plans are really analyzed before they are put on paper. Because we cannot move within a period of 5 years from a unit of electricity costing 1,000 shillings to 5 cents. It is overly being ambitious, and we question the people who are involved in these plans, because when you look at some of the fiscal policies of government, both expenditure and resource mobilization, it seems these plans are more focused on remobilization, on resource mobilization, than otherwise looking at how they are going to spend and prioritizing the areas which affect people, where they're going to spend this. So I think another challenge is consolidating some of these the different sectors, or the different ministries that are involved in planning. For example, the Ministry of the Prime Minister's Office, as well as the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, coming together and looking at some of these plans. So I think there is lack of collaboration to make sure that these plans actually they address the main issue, they address the priorities as we may consider as a country. And last, of course, it is corruption. We have talked about corruption, and currently the Inspector General of Government has said that over 20 trillion is lost in corruption annually. That is half of our budget. If our budget is 45.5 trillion, and then 20 trillion is being lost in corruption, then that means we end up with only 20 trillion to spend. So it's a pity. It's a pity as a country, and the prevalence of corruption has made everything, especially this plan, to be of a big challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Echo. And of course, at a later stage, we are going to look at how to address some of those challenges that have been posed and have been a hindrance in the implementation of the National Development Plan. Now, moving on to Brian. So, Brian, my question to you is, what are some of the opportunities that the National Development Plan 3 presents to the youth of this country?
Okay. The opportunities that were presented by the NDP3, obviously, the biggest highlight, the biggest economic indicator still went to agricultural investment. But rather, this time around it was, this time around it was well elaborated to put agriculture under the commercial agriculture. So this is among the highest economic indicators that maybe came through to the NDP3 with regards to the NDP2, because if you're to clearly state what Minister Kasai just stated during the conference of the NDP3, he said that in 2019-2020, 8 trillion Uganda shillings. That's equivalent to currently we are around 34 billion US dollars. So the NDP3 is more of looking at is more of looking into the commercial agriculture. Looking more into export percentages, export ratios, that is still through agriculture, through the SMEs as earlier on production of commodities, looking at medium-term outlook for economic growth. So this still comes back to the youth, telling us that look, we need to now go into the business sector of everything. We need to look at the commercial arm of each and everything we are doing. Because if we want to tap into the NDP3, as I earlier on said that this was looking at employment and inclusive growth, and we need to tap into these different government opportunities, to enable us have more employment skills, to enable us have more skills creation in the nation. Because if we need to also look at the other extent that even if the youth want to take part in something, is the government really transparent? Is the government really open to show us that we actually task the youth in 2C?
Okay, you can proceed.
So before we actually look at the aspect of the youth should look out for the government projects in this time. We need to first also task the government to be as transparent as possible, because if you want the NDP3 to actually benefit the youth and the children of Uganda, because if you look at the percentages, that the youth have the biggest percentage, So if we are to push the NDP3 to the people that actually need it, then we need to first sensitize the public. There's nothing that beats massive sensitization, especially for a government project. So we need to create a massive sensitization in the different regions, that is in the western, in the north, in the east, and in central. So after making sure that we have carried out information relaying to them, after pushing information to them, after sensitizing them, then we need to educate them that look, yes, we were creating sensitization the previous time, through animations, through these different videos, but now we want to educate you people about this certain government project. You understand? Saying that if we have a thing like Myoga, in Tandikwa, those things, because these are the theme words that have been used. We need to tell them that look, let's educate you about how this program is actually going to benefit you people. It's going to help you people in such a way. A, B, C. We state those things. We show that this is something that is going to, work. This still pushes the government to be more transparent than ever before, because we can't talk. The nation can't only look at development plans, time in and time out, without being accountable. So after educating these people, then we come to the empowerment bit. Empower the people. Let them know that this is how this thing is supposed to be. I need to have a team of people. I need to look at commercial agriculture. I need to look at tourism. I need to look at infrastructure that comes to real estate development. How best can we use our brains? And still this tasks us to the education sector. How best is the education sector helping our students? Are we still tagged to the previous colonial education system where we're having theoretical education? No, we need to look at practical education. Yes, give us the theory education, but also give us the skills. This will be an empowerment program in a long period of time. So before we task the youth to actually look out for the government programs, before we say how will the NDP3 help Uganda, we need to also help the youth. We need to also first ask ourselves, how did to what percentage did the NDP1 benefit Ugandans? We have to get that percentage. Then two, we look at how did the NDP2 benefit Ugandans? and we look at how will the NDP3 probably benefit Ugandans. So we have to get to the statistics and then engage them, before we actually push the burden onto the youth to look for these government projects, because that makes the government rather very irresponsible, because if you come out and you blame the youth that the youth are not looking out for the government projects, then the government itself has it fully promoted the projects, or the projects are targeting a specific center of people. And in my understanding of the government has to work for all people. So it's not all about looking at people from Central. Let's also look at the northern region. Let's look at the eastern region, because when the COVID-19 pandemic came, it affected everyone. Whether someone is a minister or someone is not a minister, whether you're educated or not. So these are some of the things we need to look into before actually pushing the blame to the youth. I beg to submit.
Thank you, Brian. So as we look at the government responsibility in this National Development Plan, I would like to ask this question to Miriam. So what are some of the responsibilities that the citizens themselves have towards the implementation of the National Development Plan?
I think that's one of the things that Brian was discussing. That's a challenge. I think the government does need to bring the National Development Plan closer to the people in order to effectively address their development needs. Because how many people actually, or even the youth at all, read the National Development Plan? I'm lucky that I go to law school and able to actually read this National Development Plan, and I'm aware that the government is actually taking steps to make changes that affect the youth, that affect the young people. But however, this is also a challenge, like Brian said, there is need for education to sensitize the youth to know that their actual challenges are actually trying to be met by the government. And they are implementing plans with the hope of actually bettering them in whatever objective that is set, whether education, whether it's job creation, wealth creation, innovation in technology and development as a whole. So the role that the youth are playing, I would say, is very little in the initiating or even the drafting of this plan. So I think it's actually one of the challenges the government is currently facing. They need to bring it down to a level that the people and even the youth as a whole and the country and individuals know the government is actually taking steps to create a better life and a better country for them as a whole. So that my colleague, that the government does need to bring it down to the people as a whole, that they know that there's actually a program being implemented and a plan that aims to increase not only their development, but as also the country as a whole.
Okay, so Miriam, if I get you and Brian, well, then you seem to suggest that this responsibility to a larger extent lies with the government.
It does. It does, because remember, the government is one of the key stakeholders that drafts this National Development Plan. And I'm not sure if they actually take the steps to consult and actually bring it down to a level where they are in communication with the public as a whole to know what the actual problems are on the ground, or they just sit in a room and they address it from a level, from a place that's far off from what's actually happening on the ground. Because when you read the National Development Plan, you don't actually see the pinpoint that we actually need to create jobs for the youth. It's just unemployment levels, wealth creation. So you sort of feel like when they're creating these plans and these initiatives to address our problems and needs as a country, the youth and the people are underlooked, and they address it from a level of economic development rather than bring it down to the individual level of the citizen of Uganda.
Okay, thank you. So let me bring Mugisha into the discussion and also get his take on this. So Mugisha, when we look at issues of information, as we have seen, there's a problem of information gap that is very, very deep in this country. Do you think the responsibility lies with the government or with the citizens themselves to look for this information?
I it should be a combined effort in that regard. But the challenge is the population you're talking about. Most of them are not educated, and these plans are actually in English. So if at all these plans were actually translated to different languages, I think it would fall, the burden will be given to the population to actually read them. But yes, I understand that English is a formal language, but when you look at the population of Uganda, most of them can't read and can't write. But if you are able to translate these plans to different local languages, then I think the argument, the burden, the government would have shared the burden. But the fact that it's in English and considering the literacy levels in Uganda, then the burden falls on the government to make sure that the population or the locals get to know about these plans. But there are other responsibilities that citizens, even without knowing the plans that they should undertake, and I think one of them is paying their taxes. The citizen of Uganda should be able to make sure that they pay their taxes, and this of course will enable the government to implement most of these plans. And another thing, as a society, we ought to call for accountability as citizens, as locals. We ought to call for accountability for the money that we pay, for these taxes that we pay. Yeah, so I believe it's a shared effort that we should make sure that we access this and also play our part in regards to the development of our nation.
Okay, thank you, Echo. So moving to Brian. So Brian, my question to you is, how best should Uganda implement this National Development Plan 3, looking at the lessons that we learned from National Development Plan 2 and 1?
How best? That is actually very tricky. How best can we look at? How best can we actually implement the NDP 3? That would be a question of research and history to how best the NDP 1 was actually implemented. What percentage outreach did it have to the people of the Republic of Uganda? Then 2, we need to also look at how was the NDP 2 implemented. That's with regards to the failures, to the bad history of the NDP 1. Because we need to, before we look at the context of how best the NDP 3 can actually be implemented, we need to, 1, know what was the implementation outreach percentage of the NDP 1. What were its strengths and what were its weaknesses? Because it was the first of the kind. That was 2010. And then we come to the NDP 2. What was the percentage outreach? Did it tackle most of the issues that were carried across from NDP 1 to NDP 2? Then we need to look at that. So that you have a scale. You have statistics that show you people are either growing economically or you're sliding back. It's not all about waiting for the economists to tell us something. There's some things that you look at annually. So how best can the NDP 3 be implemented? I'll take you backwards in 2020 when the budget was being passed, the 2020-2021 budget was being passed. The finance minister, that is Honorable Matia Kasaija, said that the primary production of commodities had increased significantly. For example, coffee production had increased from 5.7 million, that is 60 kilogram bags, to 7 million bags. Then that was between 2017 and 2019. And then fish catches had grown from 39,000 metric tons between 2017 and 2019. He also stated that the transport infrastructure had improved considerably, with the stock of the paved national road network today totaling to 5,600 kilometers up from 4,300 kilometers in 2015. That was 2015 to 2019, roughly an estimate to that. Then he also said that in the airport transport sector, 13 aerodromes were rehabilitated countrywide and were rehabilitated countrywide, and the expansion of the Entebbe, the expansion of the Entebbe International and the construction of the Kabale International airports were progressing at schedule. So how best can we do this? How best we can do implementation is working on a 50-50 scale, equal energies from the government and the people of the Republic of Uganda. Just as the previous speaker said, the previous panelist, that is Mr. Mugisha Echo. The government should do its job, get this thing to ground, sensitize people about them, and then with the citizens, let's also do our duty patriotically, For example, if you are appointed to such an office, for example, let's say in the Uganda Investment Authority, or you're made to supervise the implementation of most of these strategies, you need to be as patriotic as possible, knowing that, look, they have put me in this duty, in this office, because we have a certain goal. We have a certain gap we need to fill, a gap that wasn't filled by the NDP one, a gap that wasn't filled by the NDP two, because that is a very big one. So we need to look at rehabilitating the country, thoroughly, if we want the NDP 3 to work. So the government, in trying to implement these things and actually get something on ground kicking, we need to get the government shall have to have very patriotic leaders, very patriotic officers in those offices, so that they get to know, look, is a document being sent to me, a contract, I need to look through it, so that when I'm putting my hand on it, signing it, I'm not signing on my part that, I have this understanding with the investor, I'm going to get a certain percentage of. No, will it benefit the nation? You get? And then the government should, as much as possible, get ears on the ground. And you can only get ears on the ground if you're passing through youth leaders. So get relevant youth leaders, people that are actually, working. This is irrespective of political party, because we don't need to mix politics and development. Once a stage of politics is done, that is done. Let's look at development. You see, great nations that have actually developed, from the scale of 2016. Let's look at China. Let's look at China. It has developed strategically well. It has moved through. Why? Because people are looking at patriotism first. People are looking at human capital first, human capital development. Get the proper goods to the right people, a right channel. We need to have a consultative framework for all these things. Don't just wake up one day, formulate the NDP3, push it out, moreover in English, and then you don't sensitize. You see? First of all, before you even think about saying we are going to amend the NDP3, we shall come up with the NDP4. No. Yes, you want to come up with an NDP4 because that's where we are going, that's where we are heading to right now. But then get youth. Say, look, I know there is Aruho Brian. I know there is Lawoko Miriam. I know there is Mugisha Echo. They have an idea into maybe implementation strategies with regards to this sector. You get? So get different sectors and get youth. Yes, you will stay as the major stakeholder, but also get the youth because they'll give you rightful information rather than having people who actually work in the ministries. No, you see, because when Honorable Kasaija said that transport infrastructure had developed to 5,600 kilometers from 4,300 kilometers, we wondered, 4,300 to 5,600 is a very small gap, And then you're only looking at, the greater metropolitan area. No, you need to go on ground. So how best can we implement this is if we work with the people, if we work with the youth leaders, if we do thorough research, and if we are as transparent and as accountable as never before. Because trust me, it is very dangerous for you to be in 2022. We are looking at aspects of 4G. We are looking at steadfast development, and then you have a country with potholes. I think that's rather disillusional. So we need to look at certain things, certain criteria, knowing that if we're in the metropolitan area, how best are we going to show that actually NDP3 works? Because you will never know. One of the people from the board review may decide to visit the nation. They will not obviously tell the media that, look, or they won't tell the ambassador that, look, we are coming through. No, they'll just come up and visit the nation. And this is what they'll find. It becomes very funny. So as a nation, for us to gain back our strength, let us first work with the people so that we can have a properly thought through national development plan. I beg to submit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Now, moving to Miriam. Miriam, my question to you is, having looked at the national development plan, which stakeholders think are needed so that we can ensure its implementation aside from government?
Which stakeholders are needed? Obviously, besides the government, the private sector. That's where all the money is. If the private sector, the government work hand in hand, for example, when they're setting the objectives, I beg to go back to what Brian said about the implementation of the National Development Plan. I think, first of all, the government needs to set specific goals. And when you look back at the National Development Plan 2, the goal of the plan was to propel the country into a middle income status by 2020. And remember that the plan was started from 2015, 2016, and ran for 2019 to 2020. Now, that's a 5-year plan. And it's impossible to develop this goal or to achieve this goal in the span of 5 years. Now, this brings me back to having the government and the private sector working hand to hand to achieve the National Development Plan. Remember, the government is the one that drafts this, and they have the power to make sure that the budget is allocated. If they set a budget, it's allocated and it's implemented. Now, the private sector, on the other hand, they have the money and they can also contribute. For example, if they say, if the government decides to set, if the government sets the goals and they allocate a certain amount of the budget or the money that they have to achieve these goals, the private sector, can come in as well and also help in achieving of these goals. For example, in let's say the government says we want to increase jobs in each of the objectives. If it's agriculture, tourism, infrastructure, oil and gas sector, then they'll say we're going to work hand in hand with the private sector to make sure that we achieve and make sure that we curb the unemployment rate by a certain percentage. So it comes with number one, setting realistic goals, both between the government and the private sector, and then making sure that they're achieved. So I think a key stakeholder that's important in making sure that the National Development Plan is implemented would be the private sector.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Miriam. So Mugisha, my last question to you is, looking at the challenges that you were able to front earlier, if I still remember clearly well, there were things to do with corruption and so forth. So how do we address those challenges to ensure that we are ready to properly implement the National Development Plan 3?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maybe to go back to the question that you asked, Miriam, another stakeholder I think that will be so important is the civic society, because these are kind of people who are on the ground and they kind of know the challenges and actually the reality. So it is very important not only to involve the private sector, but it's profound as well to involve the civil society. Well, going back to the solutions in regards to some of these challenges that we are having, and of course one of them is corruption, because you realize that it depletes the budget, and actually because most of the money does not do what it is intended to do. And of course, one of the solutions that we think in regards to corruption, we're having a lot of dead aid. Most of the money that comes into the country does not actually do what it's supposed to do, because it comes in as cash, as money itself. So we would pass laws that would really would stop such things like receiving grants or direct money, and instead would advocate for foreign investment, direct foreign investment, instead of having money. Whoever is interested in supporting Uganda would actually come and involve himself in the infrastructure and everything, other than giving cash. So I think stopping the dead aid and invest and welcoming the foreign direct investment will be some of the ways we would actually make sure that we stop the corruption. And of course is life audits. It's important for us to audit most of these public servants. If you're in a position whereby we know how much you get, we are able to audit you to know what you have, your worth, basically. So there should be transparency in regards to property owned and all that, and we can do that through life audit. Another solution is in regards to we are having a lot of administrative costs in Uganda. Almost each year we're having a new district being created. And that does not actually improve service delivery, according to the Ministry of Finance and Planning and Economic Development. It says that actually increasing the districts that we're having just increases on the administrative costs rather than improving the service delivery. The government says otherwise, because I think there is a political motivation in that regard. But I think reducing the districts and we go back to a few districts, it would help to save such money so that it goes into service delivery and lessening the burden that we have as illustrated by some of the challenges that we're having in these plans. But I think another thing is in regards to parliament. I think we have a lot of members of parliament. When I was looking around, compared to Nigeria, which has over 200 million people, that is population 200 million. Nigeria has in the Senate, both in the Senate and members and in the representation, there are over 400 members of parliament. When it comes to Uganda, which has only 44 million people, why are we having over 500 members of parliament? Look at the money that goes into that, the salaries and the allowances and everything. So if we can branch all that money, we reduce the seats of our members of parliament and invest that money into these different sectors that we have acknowledged that they are key drivers to growth, it will be very, very important. Another thing is collaborating these plans with the sustainable development goals. If at all these plans were actually planned and prepared in regards to the sustainable development goals, we wouldn't be having the discussion we're having right now in regards to priorities. Because when you look at some of those the sustainable development goals, poverty, hunger, health, education, quality life, and everything, they are kind of the priorities which the government would actually have emphasized or have looked at in regards to development of these plans. We're talking about stakeholders and involving them. We're supposed to involve these stakeholders, this civic society, the private sector, in all this process of planning, both the preparation, the implementation, as well as the monitoring and evaluation. We have to make sure that we involve the stakeholders to make sure that the goals that we set are actually achieved. Another challenge that we had is population growth. We are having a high population growth as compared to the rest and also our neighbors. That is a very big challenge. But if we are actually able to stop the corruption and reduce the administrative cost, we can channel all that money to service delivery. And I think it can help us to make sure that the resources that we have are actually available to the growing population. And finally, I think in regards to inequality, we're having unbalanced development. You find that the central is more developed than the east or the west or the north. So I would suggest, if at all would move the capital city from Kampala, maybe we have such balanced development. If we had such strategy, to be vital and very important and to help us to achieve some.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Into the discussion, Brian, my last question to you is: the talk around town right now is on the final investment decision in regards to oil and gas. I would like to leave here after asking you this question. How excited are you about oil in this country as a youth?
Wow.
Brian, you look excited.
I should really be excited about the oil and gas. That is if it's put into proper use, because we live in a nation where impossibilities are actually possibilities. So I should be excited because, one, as a youth, I know obviously if things are put to proper use, there's proper accountability and transparency, into some of these oil projects, then yes, because if I'm to maybe to bring it back to the mind of the Daily Monitor, was it yesterday or today on News Vision, it was saying that employment opportunities will be there. So I'm trying to look at the bit of our engineering students. I'm trying to look at the bit of our students who want to major in oil and gas, and the what is it called? The business class that has a lot of interest into oil and gas. Then one, for the skyrocketing prices that we have been having, I think that will, in the long run help us a lot. Then two, skills creation. Skills creation is very key. That's why I'm very excited, because if these things are actually put into play, we are going to have a lot of skills creation for our students. Students from Chambogo University, students from Makerere University, students from these other different universities. People who have been doing oil and gas studies. This is I don't know how I can call it. This is I even don't have the best term to term it. This is a miracle. This is, I don't know. You know how you dream and then you know you fall asleep and then you dream that you're in heaven. This is actually what should be implemented, because if we're talking about oil and gas, trust me, we are going to have massive skills creation. That is if it's actually I don't even have the right words to explain this. I would cry if I was given the platform, but I'm very happy, for skills creation, for sensitization. In the long run, if the finances are used properly, we could actually reduce on the debt rate, Uganda's debt rate, which, okay. As Ugandans, we say that we have a very big debt rate, but when we go on Google, we get different results. So, but for a person who is at least feeling that debt rate and the 50,000 shillings note, really, no, God should have mercy on us, and we get the oil and gas.
Okay, Brian, let me bring in Miriam. We are running out of time. So, Miriam, how excited are you? In 2 minutes, how excited are you about the oil and gas in this country?
Oh, let me first go back to what Echo had mentioned about. First of all, the National Development Fund, I think they need to be meticulous in when they're drafting it. That way we can have the checks and balances that we need. So if they're going to say that we're going to direct we're going to set an objective to make sure that we increase jobs, whether it's in the oil sector, the gas sector, the tourism sector, they need to say, this is the person in charge of doing that. This is how much we're allocating to doing that. And this is when it will be achieved. Rather than just stating a national development plan with goals and wishes and visions, and there's no accountability. And even if, like Echo says, having lifestyle audits of those who are in charge, but you can't audit someone if you don't know who's in charge of doing what. So if you're going to set a plan, stipulate and say, we're setting an objective, this is who's going to be in charge, this is how much we're giving to that objective, and this is what we hope to achieve. That way, in the end, when it's not achieved, there's someone who you can hold accountable. Now, going to Brian being excited about the oil and gas, I'm very, very excited, especially the fact that it's going to create jobs for the youth, like Brian said. Ugandan youth need jobs. We have highly skilled individuals who are going to school and they leave university, but they don't have jobs. So I really hope that the government does follow through on this and the stakeholders involved actually achieve the goal and do create jobs for me, because what Uganda has over 80 oil wells drilled currently. And if they follow through on this is a good advancement for not just the country as a whole, but even the young people.
Okay, thank you so much. I can see we all hold the same excitement about the oil and gas. So we have come to the end of today's debate. I would like to get closing remarks from the debaters. I'll start right from Mugisha Echo.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, Echo.
Finally, we would say that like we have analyzed all these from Plan 1, Plan 2, and Plan 3. These are awesome frameworks that actually they show where we are going and where we have been and where we are going. But one of the most important things that we should know is that we should set these plans in a smart way. We should be strategic. They should be measurable and attainable. When you look at the plans that we are having, and you tell me that they should be achieved in a period of 5 years, I think, like I've been saying, it is being overly ambitious. We should set long-term goals as well as short-term. But when you look at most of these plans that we are talking about, most of them are actually long-term goals, which are being, the plan, according to the plan, they are telling us that to be achieved in the next 5 years. That's why we are having a lot of spillover. We are having a lot of spillover with the goals which are where they have been set, but they're not achieved, so they end up going into another plan. And then you end up worrying on what will happen in 2040. Shall we have all these plans that have been spilling over, and you may find that we have not achieved any? So I think we should be strategic. We should plan in a very strategic way, and not being so overly ambitious. We should have long-term and short-term goals in that regard. But otherwise, I believe even if the growth is very low, 3%, and our plans actually we're supposed to be growing at 70%, there's a lot still to do, and it's a combined effort both for the government as well as the civil society and the population at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Echo, for just hope at the end of this discussion. So let me get closing remarks from Brian.
In conclusion, the government of the Republic of Uganda should draw several lessons and also gather a number of opportunities that inform the people about the economic stimulus and growth strategy in implementation of the budget and the NDP. Because from the NDP 1, NDP 2 to the NDP 3, we are now we are going to cover 15 years if we finish this NDP. That is half of the the 30-year vision. So where have we reached currently? I think the government should look into this and get to know that some things, as Mr. Echo said, that some things are really unrealistic. We need to draw realistic goals, and even if we are too ambitious, I think we should get a consultative implementation framework, and then draw the youth into it, draw the different stakeholders into it, so that we can live in this nation and benefit in it as one people. Thank you so much.
Like my colleague said, I'm very optimistic about this national development plan. If the key stakeholders can, I think it will depend on the implementation and the actions taken by and the measures taken by the government and the public sector and the civic society. And I'm very hopeful that with this NDP 3 that they've said, they have set realistic goals, because remember, the vision is to transform Ugandan society from a peasant to a modern and prosperous society within the next 30 years. As previously in NDP 2, they had set goals to be achieved in the next 5 years. So I'm very hopeful that within the 30 years that they've set, Uganda will achieve this national development plan if the government is held accountable and if they actually have the people interest at heart.
Thank you so much. We have come to the end of our debate for today. I would like to appreciate the debaters, our panelists. This has been a very, 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 very fruitful debate, very articulate. The speakers really researched, and I would like to really appreciate you for that. Thank you so much, students from Cavendish University. Today, we were discussing the National Development Plan 3, and the question is, to what extent are our priorities aligned to the National Development Plan? I would like to also thank Center for Constitutional Governance for bringing this debate to us, as well as Civic Space TV. And thank you so much to our dear viewers for watching. See you again next week, same time. Bye.